What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Christian Jackson here with Tony Liebert, sports reporter at Bring Me the News. He is our Minnesota expert for today. Tony, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I always love to talk some hoops.
So, the Niko Medved era is here. And man, was that Colorado State just an awesome team last year? Ripped off, what was it? 11 wins, I think, to close the regular season, including what they did in the Mountain West tournament. Beat Memphis and then lose on a heartbreaker to Maryland in that second round. But returning to Minnesota where it all started for him, and this Big Ten is a monster, and we'll see. We'll get into this roster and how ready they are this year. But just tell me about the hiring of Niko Medved and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, I mean, as a college basketball sicko, Niko Medved's a head coach. I've just loved watching his teams at Colorado State the last few years, and this year was no different. I mean, they just had a really fun team with Nick Clifford, who's not first round pick, obviously now with the Kings, I believe. And it just he's developed talent very well. David Roddy was a first round pick. He was a Minnesota high school guy, and so he's recruited the state of Minnesota well, even when he's at Colorado State. And one thing that I think Gophers fans wanted was maybe to see Kyan Evans come with him to Colorado State, but he's now at UNC. And as we talking about the roster more, that kind of, I think, if he followed him to Colorado State, that could have helped the ceiling of this team in year one. But I mean, it's hard to not be excited because Medved's done it at a place like Colorado State that's not a powerhouse program, and he's built competitive teams year after year. And just from a pure basketball X's and O's and schematic standpoint, I think it's one of the best head coaches that Minnesota's had in a while. Anyone that follows college basketball knows Medved's a respected name, and the choice just seemed obvious. He was a student manager at Minnesota the last time they made the Final Four back in the 90s, and the only time they did with Clem Haskins as the head coach. So he's seen Minnesota at its best. He grew up a Minnesota fan. He grew up like 30 minutes from campus. So he went to the U. He graduated there. So it's just all the signs made it too obvious, and they got the deal done. And it's an exciting time to cover the Gophers and be a fan of the Gophers because there's some optimism in the air for the first time in a while.
3 of the last 4 years won 25 games or more and made the NCAA tournament. A couple of my other favorite things that jump out when you look at his KenPom pages, the last 3 seasons, 9th in the country, 2nd in the country, and 12th in the country in assist percentage because the ball is just moving, and it's obviously he has the players to do it, and credit to them, but it is his scheme and the way that he and his staff build. Their 2-point percentage under Niko Medved since he took over in 2019 was in the top 25 every year but one. And that's just the type of basketball that he wants to play on the offensive end is just beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. That's why he has the respect of people who've been watching college basketball and been following Colorado State. So I think it's a really exciting time. And to start with this roster, obviously you have to only able to bring one piece from Colorado State, and Jalen Crocker-Johnson. UNC just brought out way too much money for Kyan Evans. You keep a couple pieces, and then it's just a lot of building through the portal. I don't really know who to start with just because there are so many pieces, and there are some mystery box upside guys that are just kind of – I kind of just want to throw it to you. Who's the best player on this team? Who are the top 2 guys on this team in your opinion?
So I found it really interesting. I mean, looking at the portal class as a whole before practice started and before these exhibition games started, a guy I really liked was Bobby Durkin from Davidson. Just like a really true knockdown three-point shooter, a versatile guy. And I was surprised the first exhibition game, he came off the bench. And we saw North Carolina transfer Cade Tyson against NDSU. They had an exhibition last week at home. He led the team with 28 points, and he looked like the player we saw when he was at Belmont before he went to UNC and 2 off seasons ago, when he was kind of one of those hotter names in the portal as a mid-major guy who could take a step up at a higher level. And he was playing at that level as someone that could be a leading scorer on a Big Ten team. And after that game, he's probably the favorite to do that. But anyone who follows this program and follows Minnesota basketball would probably say Isaac Osma one of the only 2 returners on the team, is probably the second best player on the team. And I think he has to be if this team wants to reach its ceiling. He's only a sophomore, but he played high school basketball in Minnesota, opted to stay home over some top offers. And last year as a true freshman, he was in the rotation. He had moments where he looked really good. He's a true point guard. And we've seen Medved at Colorado State develop guys like Isaiah Stevens and Kyan Evans. And I think Osma has the highest ceiling out of anyone on this team. I don't think there's probably not any NBA players on this team, but I think Osma could do that. He's incredibly efficient, a great decision maker, and if this team wants to be frisky in the Big Ten and knock off some teams here and there, I don't know if they have the high ceiling to make a run in the tournament, a run in the postseason, but if they want to be one of those teams, I think they're going to need Osma to be a 12-point per game scorer, maybe like 6 or 7 assists.
6 points and 2 assists in that freshman year from him. What was the process of Niko retaining him? Like, did he test the waters in the portal? And then what has his offseason look like other than just increased usage and a really great offensive mind, mentoring him in a way? But do you think as a player, there were big steps he took this offseason as well?
Yeah. I've interviewed him a couple times too. He's just a very, he's from like the middle of nowhere in northern Minnesota on like the Iron Range. And he went to high school with like graduating class of like 20 kids. So he's a really interesting kid, that's for sure. And that was, I think, priority number 1 when Medved got hired, because there were a lot of seniors on the team last year. I think maybe only like 3 or 4 guys had an option to return. And he was the one that Gophers fans were like, they need to make sure he comes back. He's a local guy. Gophers fans love him. He played in the state tournament at Williams Arena at the Barn a couple times in high school. And he probably could have gotten bigger offers elsewhere. I think he was a type of freshman that I think talent evaluators realized that with a bigger role, he has a really high potential. And it was big that the Gophers staff was able to retain him, because he's a guy that they can build their offense around and give him more responsibility. And I think what we've seen some improvements this year in terms of his scoring. I mean, last year he was kind of playing second fiddle whenever he was on the floor to a lot of the veteran guys they had, like Lakai Patterson or Mike Mitchell Jr. And I think this year, especially in that first exhibition game, I think he's ready to be the lead guard on this team. And I think that's what makes things interesting heading into the year.
I watched the tweet you posted of Cade Tyson dropping that 28 and looked really good. You see that upside that people were excited about after his time at Belmont and heading to Carolina. Has there been conversations of, there was just some general dysfunction of Carolina, of a lot of guys being unhappy in their role and a lot of guys underperforming expectations? I'm kind of giving him the benefit, the combination of seeing what he did in that, just with the fact that, Ian Jackson left, Drake Powell got drafted, was coming off the bench. There was just a lot going on in Carolina. How do you think he kind of emerged from that? And there was no doubt that he was able to be a Power 5 player. It wasn't like, oh, I'm not good enough for this level. It was just like things didn't work out at Carolina. Is that a fair assessment, or what is your take on just kind of what happened last year?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's played basketball at any level, I feel like it's such a confidence thing that if your confidence just falls off and you're stuck on the bottom of the bench and you're not hitting shots, it's just hard to get back in a rhythm. And I think that's just kind of what it was. I mean, Cade Tyson's older brother, Hunter Tyson, now in the NBA with the Denver Nuggets, he comes from a very basketball-centric family, and it just like anyone wants to play for North Carolina, and he probably saw that offer when he got in the portal, and he's like, who doesn't want to play for North Carolina? And he probably saw the year going a lot different than it did. And it just sometimes fit matters a ton in basketball and just sports in general. And I just don't think it was a good fit. And I think now he was the last scholarship player they added this year in the portal. It was like in late May, early June. And it's clear that the Gophers, I think, saw a big role for him in the system. And that first game, I think it's clear that they kind of want to play through him, and they know he might be the guy that has to get. He can score 20 on any given night in the Big Ten, I think, in this system, given the team that they have, and the Gophers are giving him the opportunity to do that. And I don't think he had that opportunity at North Carolina. And it'll be interesting the pieces around Tyson and Osama, though, because they just have a lot of players with like similar skill sets. And I think that's what makes this team interesting in general.
When you say these similar skill sets, expand on that. Who are these players that are similar to you and why?
Yeah, so in the backcourt, they have Chauncey Willis Jr., Western Michigan transfer, who was really interesting pickup. I mean, he was, I think, former Gatorade Player of the Year in Michigan, and then he went JUCO, Western Michigan, Minnesota now, and he averaged like I think around like 6 assists per game last year in the MAC. Might have been the leading scorer in the conference. But he's an interesting player to play next to us, Osama, because Osama is a true like point guard. He's at his best with the ball in his hands. And Willis kind of has a similar skill set. And then Langston Reynolds, Northern Colorado transfer, had a breakout year last year in that conference. I don't think he's a very good shooter. He really only attempted like 1 3 per game. He shot at like a 40% clip, but that's kind of a red flag if you're a two guard. So the backcourt's interesting. And then I mentioned Bobby Durkin earlier, who I think has a pretty similar skill set to Cade Tyson. And he produced at a similar level in the A10 at Davidson compared to Tyson in the Missouri Valley. I kind of see both those conferences as a similar level of competition. And then in the front court, they kind of have the same like 3, 6, 7, 6, 8 guys with Jalen Crocker Johnson, who performed well on a team that was one shot away from the Sweet 16 at Colorado State last year. And then they have Robert Viola, who's a San Jose State transfer, who really good rebounder in the Mountain West. And I think Medved noticed that the last couple of years at Colorado State, and that's kind of why they went after him. So it's just like I can tell the strategy they had building the team. And I think throughout the year, it's going to be an up and down year, I think. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes with the rotation and who fits in where. And a lot of these guys, they did have 2 years of eligibility left instead of just 1. So it'll be interesting to see how they build off this year. I think it could go a bunch of different ways, but it's an interesting team building strategy that they took.
A few interesting things that popped in my head as you were catching me up there. So Langston Reynolds from Northern Colorado. Something's in the water in Northern Colorado because they got Dalton Connect, St. Thomas, and now Reynolds are these guys that kind of out of nowhere just like skyrocket up and then go to a power conference. So is there a world where Langston Reynolds is the, I don't know, second or third leading scorer on this team?
Yeah, so the starting lineup in the exhibition was Chauncey Willis Jr., Isaac Osama, Cade Tyson, Crocker Johnson, and Viola. Mm-hmm. It was interesting in the exhibition because they did a lot of 3-guard lineups, and I think that might be this team at their best, to be honest, with Osama, Willis Jr., and Langston Reynolds on the floor at the same time. And Langston Reynolds athletically probably is the best athlete on the team, I would say, and probably has the highest ceiling as a perimeter defender. But I have questions about his shooting. And he didn't finish very well in the first game. He missed a lot of layups, which I think obviously it's such a small sample size in a season opener exhibition. But he's normally a very good finisher, at least based on his stats at Northern Colorado. And it'll be interesting because I think he has the versatility that gives him an option to do like a lot of different things defensively and even offensively. He might not be as good of a passer as Chauncey Willis Jr. or Osama, but he can guard the 3 or even the 4. He's a very dense, physical like defender that I think could unlock a lot of different things.
And then we talk about Viola coming in and just the fact that alongside Crocker Johnson could be starting 2 guys that are 6'8". And while that's kind of what Niko's done similar things with at Colorado State and obviously found a lot of success there doing that, but there were also times against teams like New Mexico or Boise State where they were kind of susceptible to getting bullied a little bit on the interior. And now you're going to the Big Ten where there's so many good bigs. Is that kind of a red flag or a number one concern of this roster and is the guy from Central Arkansas, Turner, is he gonna mix in here?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that's the biggest red flag on this roster. Crocker Johnson kind of played the 5 for them in that run last year at Colorado State, and I think he has the capability to do that along with Viola, but it's different in the Mountain West to the Big Ten when you're playing these teams like Purdue, like Michigan, like UCLA, who have NBA level bigs. And Nehemiah Turner from Central Arkansas, I thought he was one of the most interesting additions from the portal. I mean, if you look at his stats last year, I think he had like a 30-point game in the ASUN tournament, and he's 6'10". He has a lot of skills. And I was pretty shocked to see he was like the last guy off the bench in the exhibition game. He has 3 years of eligibility left, so they could have a longer plan with him. He's definitely the most physically imposing player on their team. And if he's able to develop, I think it could unlock a couple things. And that's where we could see them outperform expectations when players like that hit their ceiling sooner than expected. But based on what I saw in the exhibition, I think it's going to be Viola, Crocker Johnson, and then Grayson Grove, who redshirted last year, didn't play at all. He's 6'7", not as physically as imposing as either Crocker Johnson, Viola, but he was kind of the first backup big to come off the bench. And that honestly raised a little bit of questions for me because I don't think he's physical enough to handle himself in the Big Ten. He's a talented offensive player, but I just don't know if the 4 or the 5 is his natural position. So it'll be the front court has serious questions. That could be the reason why this team doesn't even meet expectations, or if they struggle this year, I think that's going to be the reason why.
Really interesting profile on Turner that he didn't really play until February and then just had some huge games. Like you said, the 37 in the ASUN tournament, 11 to 12 from the free throw line. And he had some like 4 assist games and stuff. Maybe it's nice to have multiple years of eligibility if he is more of a project, but and I know the timetable might be not as fast as we want if, like you said, he was one of the last guys on the bench scrimmage, but it's a really interesting profile.
100%. And the ASUN's almost a true like low major conference. Out of anyone they added from the portal, that's a big jump to make to the Big Ten. I think kind of in this portal era, we haven't seen many players from a conference like that jump to a high major immediately and contribute, especially when they're true freshmen. So I'm fascinated to watch his development because I agree. He might have had one of the most interesting profiles out of a player they added. And the fact that he is 6'10", go into practice, he's very physically imposing. Like he's like a get off the bus, like type of player that you want to be the first guy off the bus where the other team's a little intimidated. Like he's a big dude. And if the Gophers are able to develop him, I think he could be a really fascinating player.
A couple of guys with some injury questions. BJ Omat, really good at North Dakota, played a few games at Cal, and then I think after like the 4th game, he was out with injury. Is he good health-wise? And like I said, I was really impressed with what I saw of him, at the beginning of the season with Cal and at North Dakota.
Yeah, I mean, he's another interesting player too that I forgot to mention earlier, that he's kind of in that same skill set as Cade Tyson and Bobby Durkin, where he's like 6'6" to 6'7", and he can guard multiple positions, and he's a dynamic scorer. And he has struggled with injuries. He had a season-ending injury last year at Cal, and he had a small procedure this year in the offseason as well. But he played in the exhibition, and he looked healthy. And the plan is for him to be in the rotation to start the year. And he's the type of guy that gives me, I guess, some optimism that this is a deep team, because he can be if he's your 7th or 8th guy, that's a solid Big Ten rotation. And this team might not have the same top end talent as the top teams in this conference, but they have a rotation of 8 guys that I think can help them be competitive against just about any team in the Big Ten this season.
Another name to throw at you, Chance Stevens. And I remember when I did Maryland last year, I said to my Maryland interview that Wake Forest played Loyola like 3 years ago, Loyola Marymount, and Chance Stevens had a career high 23, and I was watching that game, and I'm like, this dude is a killer, and then he disappears. He deals with injuries. He couldn't, make a dent at Maryland in his 2 years there. Is he like live? Because when I just think of how good of a shooter he was in that one game, and then what Niko's offense looks like, could Chance reemerge here?
Yeah, so he is, I think, out indefinitely with a injury again.
Poor guy.
It's not I don't have any details on that. I don't know the specifics, but I would imagine that we do not see him much this year, if at all, which is kind of unfortunate because looking at his profile too, when they added him, he looked like a player that could give them some depth in the backcourt, and if he gets like some stability in a system like this, like he can regain his confidence, like we talked about with Cade Tyson, and he could get an opportunity. And it just doesn't seem like that's probably going to be the case this year. It'll be interesting to see if he sticks around. In terms of, I believe if he doesn't play this year, he would still have 2 years of eligibility left. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I don't think we'll see him much this year.
What's it been like to just bring in so many new faces? Has like a Jalen Crocker Johnson emerged as a leader, as a guy who knows the system and stuff? And is there any nuggets or stories you have of just how the chemistry's just been gelling of bringing these guys together?
Yeah, so at Big Ten Media Days, it was Jalen Crocker Johnson and Isaac Osma who were with Niko Medved. And as much as you can look into that, I think it shows that those are the two leaders that this team envisions, I guess. And it makes sense that Osma was the big returning player and Crocker Johnson was the only guy who followed him from Colorado State. But it's definitely interesting because it's so many new faces, and that was the case a lot with the Ben Johnson era and just Minnesota in general the last few years. It's just been a lot of transfers every single year, and I think these transfers are a lot different. I think the culture is a lot different. The few practices I went to, it's very, very high energy, and I think this team and program has some optimism that just really hasn't been there the last few years. And it'll be interesting if this season gives them, I guess, some momentum into the portal next year. They already have a good high school recruiting class with a couple local kids, and if it'll be, I guess, a jumping off point or rebuilding year, I guess only time will tell. But they have the talent, I think, to surprise some people.
Yeah, I feel like in a season like this, and with a new coach that is a winner, like we know he's good, but it's just such a big ask to throw a roster together and compete in a league that's this much of a monster. I feel like being frisky is, and by frisky, my definition of frisky is you surprise some people at home and you beat some teams that you weren't supposed to beat, and you aren't getting blown out against teams that are really good. I feel like that is momentum for next season. Is that kind of how you're viewing it? And is there any world where they like really shock the world they can finish like in the top 12 of the Big Ten?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because they have an incredibly light non-conference schedule again. I probably
That's a Minnesota staple.
Yeah, I talk about that way too much on Twitter, but it frustrates me as just someone who watches college basketball because it just you're right away like shortening your margin for error by just tenfold. And they do play at Missouri, and I'll give them that. That's an improvement from last year. That's a true quad one series test in the non-conference against a good SEC team. But it's just outside of that, they have like a neutral game in South Dakota against San Francisco, which just makes zero sense to me. And then their holiday tournament, they're in a field with Stanford, Santa Clara, and St. Louis. There's a chance one of those is maybe a quad one game, but the chips would have to fall pretty well for that to be the case. So it's not going to be until January that we really know much about this team. Like they could easily go have one loss in the non-conference, and people are like, "Oh, Niko Medved, first year, he's doing well," and that's not really a good measuring stick. But I guess going back to what I said earlier, I think if this team shocks people, it's going to be because of Isaac Osma. He's the level of player that can take a huge step and be one of the more impressive guards in the Big Ten, in my opinion. I think that's his ceiling, and it's hard to throw that all at a sophomore, a true sophomore, but I think he has the potential to do that. And if he does that, I think we're going to see him pick off a few teams. I mean, the Gophers did it last year. They had one of the weirdest resumes in the country with like 6 quad 1 wins and then like a couple of quad 3 losses. But I don't know if they're going to lose those same quad 3 games, but I could see them picking off a few teams at home, and it'll be Osama and Cade Tyson at the top, and it's if they can find that third guy too. If a Bobby Durkin emerges to be a 10-point per game scorer or a Langston Reynolds, it's just there's a lot of guys that can emerge, and I think one of them have to if this team wants to exceed those expectations.
There you have it, Tony. Thanks for coming on and breaking it down. I, just as a fan, feel like we're just aligned. Before Niko took this job, just that he's awesome. What he did at Colorado State was awesome. They're fun to watch, and it's bringing new energy to the program.
100%. It should be a fun time for Minnesota basketball, which hasn't been the case in a while.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Tony.